how many of you have asked AppZen to have approval workflows available in AppZen? Has anyone here asked for that? Let me actually change that question. Does anybody have clarity as to why we thought this was so important to incorporate into the AppZen steps? And whoever wants to answer that question can get a cute little spider. Anyone? Okay. Oh, well, I've already talked about this, so anything I say today, you can't hold against me. So the compliance and fraud, this is a team effort. So let's look at it through this lens. Have you ever had to go and receive a high-risk audit report and look at it and say, hey, you know what, I need more information on this. I really wish the manager would actually be able to give me details. And then you have to reject it, and then the employee has to go get information from their manager, and they have to attach something, and then they have to resubmit it. Does that happen to anyone? Yeah. Okay, so that's what we mean by team effort. We know that a lot of times the finance teams might not have all the information. They know what the travel and expense policies are. You know that this shouldn't be allowed, but sometimes it is allowed. Sometimes you reject it and you get an employee coming back to you saying, "Mate, my manager said this was okay. Why are you rejecting this?" And then you have to go talk to the manager and say, "Okay, resubmit it and I'll approve it." So has that happened to anyone? Okay. So that is the problem that we're solving for. Now, I don't want anyone to think that we're taking the approval workflow away from the other system. What this is doing is making it easier for you as an auditing team to be able to get the information you need without having to do anything, right? So you probably spend a lot of time looking at every single high risk, every single medium risk, and determining, what do I do with this, right? Sometimes you know that it's something that you can approve. Sometimes you're not sure. And a lot of times you have to go ask other folks. You have to go back to the employee, you have to go back to the manager. And that's why we call it a team effort, because there's a lot of tribal knowledge that you need to know to be able to answer that question on if this is approved. Like sometimes it's a business expense that's outside of travel and expense policy that you've embedded, but the only way for you to know that is that the manager would have to tell you, oh no, I said that one was okay. They're within budget because it was a business meal or whatever it might be. So the importance here is that you are now going to be able to communicate to the managers directly in AppZen, and they're going to be able to approve and reject things in AppZen, right? So they'll receive email notifications, they'll have a work list available to them, only for the things that are high risk, right? And so you can actually truly think about, if we are now doing this, what steps do we need them to take in AppZen and what steps do we need them to take in the expense management system for approvals? So you really get a more open opportunity to decide, where am I going to hold all of my workflow steps? So today, your process probably looks something like the employee submits the report, it goes to AppZen, and your auditor looks at it. They either approve it or reject it. It goes back to the employee. They resubmit it with additional material or not. Maybe there's, a bit of a circle that goes on for a little while until you figure it out. Or you approve it, it goes back to the expense management system, manager approves it, and it moves forward. So that's the current state, right? So what we want to do is make it easier for those managers to have visibility into all of their high-risk spend. So now, when someone submits an expense report, and you get to create these rules using that same DIY framework that we just talked about. So that same framework that you see in that previous session, that you're able to go in and create custom rules, you can use to create custom workflows, and also have managers being able to approve it. So I have some really good examples over here, but I want to hear from everyone here. Can you think of a circumstance where you want the manager to look at it instead of spending your time looking at it? Do you have anything that's high risk that you're 90% of the time approving or rejecting? Maddie. That's a great example. So you're pulling in a workflow based off of possibly a cost center in the expense management system for that employee. So when this gets submitted, typically it would be high risk, but in these circumstances it's not, and we want that validated by this team instead. Is that about right? And that use case can spread across so many different areas. So that's exactly what we're opening up over here. Grant funded. And what identifier do you have that it's grant funded? Mm-hmm. Got it. And do you have a workflow built for that in your expense management system, or is it just something? Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so very similar to that. And I was thinking of one, and I actually have a good example of this. You can move me over to the demo screen now, if that's okay. All good? Okay. Actually, quick story. It wasn't too long ago, I was with my wife at a bar, and there was a gentleman sitting next to me, and he's telling me, he'd probably had 1 to 9 too many drinks, and he was telling me that he was putting all of this on his corporate credit card. And I didn't tell him what I did for a living, but he was telling me, he's like, I put all this on my corporate credit card. Now, mind you, he was alone, and he was spending hundreds of dollars, and he was telling me, I've spent thousands of dollars, and all I do is go in and add 12 attendees and submit it on an expense report, and I have no problem getting away with it. So, he's telling me that, and I wish I would have got his company name, because we probably have a new customer that'd be sitting in here right now. But these things exist, and so like the first example that I have up over here, and again, same framework that we just looked at. So this example up over here, expense report amount based on approval. So if it's over a certain dollar amount, this is how we would have caught someone in that circumstance. So anytime an expense report is over a certain dollar threshold, automatically goes to the manager for approval. Even if it's not considered high risk, you probably still want to put their eyes on it, because they know that's a business need or not a business need. But on top of that, you might want to add some criteria to that, saying like, if, and this is where you can like pinpoint specific employees and add their managers into it, because if this said employee was consistently adding in 12 attendees, maybe we want to put them on that list and say, anytime this person submits an expense report for a meal over X amount of dollars with this amount of attendees on it, have the manager review it so they can actually look and say, was he really in Austin that week? Did he really take 10 people out to dinner, and was his receipt itemized? So then the manager actually starts to see patterns of behavior. And you don't have to worry about doing that as auditors anymore, because the managers are going to get visibility and consistency. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a second, because not only are the managers going to have visibility into their work list for approvals, but they'll also have visibility into what's called team intelligence, which gives them dashboards of all of their employee behaviors, high risk spend, high risk by expense type, all of that kind of stuff. Gotcha. Hmm. Not yet. That is a roadmap item for being able to attach additional receipts in AppZen or send a request. You can do that right now with the request more information option. So and we can talk a little bit about that. So like, let's assume that we're in that circumstance. It goes to the manager, they can approve it and they can add a comment because the auditors can still look at it. It doesn't automatically get approved unless you want it to. So you get to choose which models like get approved by the manager and the auditors don't look at, and you get to choose what auditors have to look at whether or not the manager approved it. So you're not losing any visibility. You are gaining the ability to not have to approve things that you typically would need to look at. But in that circumstance, maybe they would say approve. They would add a comment to the auditor and say, request more information from the employee and have them add the documentation that we need. Now, we also have document recognition. If it's a consistent document that your team is using, you can turn on the model for document recognition. We can train the AI on that document, and if it's not attached to that expense type, we can flag it. So that's something else that we can consider. Any other questions on that? So again, really quite simple to review. This is manager approval. Again, same kind of framework that you were just looking at. So expense report header, and again, there are all the fields that you can choose from for when you want something approved. Again, this is expense report header. You can go all the way down to the line item level and choose like, what do we want to have happen? And then is greater than or equal to $3,000. And then over here, the request approval. And as you were all here today with Kanal, he went through and showed you how you can have a hierarchy to have these approvals go through. So you can, we set that hierarchy up for you so that whenever these approvals go through, you can choose from the traversal configuration which employee or which employee level it's supposed to go to. So maybe it's not supposed to go to the direct manager, but it's supposed to go to a department head. Or maybe it's supposed to go to a certain country configuration or shared services head or something along those lines. So you get to choose how you want that hierarchy to look for when you want these approvals to occur. Yes? Mm-hmm. So that's a really good question. So they'll receive an email notification that you're seeing right here. So they'll receive this email notification on what they need to approve. They'll be able to click on view details and it'll take them directly into AppZen's work list. And I'll show you that work list here in just a second. Of course, they'll also be able to see it on their mobile device. So it is mobile friendly. They'll see those approvals. We send that email notification. And are you going to say, are there reminders? Okay. Roadmap. That question gets asked all the time. There is a Teams integration that we are developing. I don't know if that's going to be ready this December, but yes, like that question comes up all the time. Can we approve directly through email? Can we approve through Teams? And I know that those are roadmap items, but I'm not going to say when because that's someone above me that'll answer that question. Sid, what can I do for you, man? Nice to see you again, by the way. Mm-hmm. Sure. Good question. So a couple of things on that end. We're not taking, and I want to make sure everyone knows this, we're not taking over the expense management system workflow by any means, right? When a manager in your expense management system looks at a report, they have to look at the entire report. Well, they're supposed to look at the entire report. And we know that that doesn't always happen. Otherwise, things like AppZen wouldn't exist because they were doing a very meticulous job of it. But in this circumstance, what happens is this email notification goes through. The audit trail will reflect anything that happens in AppZen, in your expense management system. So they'll get this email notification, and then what'll happen is they'll go to this work list over here, right? So that's what you're seeing now, right? I log in as a manager into AppZen, and I see this work list. I can see the whole report. If I wanted to, I can see the whole report. I can click on specific lines, but what it's actually showing me over here on the right-hand side are the lines that I need to approve or reject on that report, right? That actually have problems from an expense audit perspective. Not a policy perspective like you're running into in expense management systems, but from AppZen and what we found as an audit issue. So we look at it and we say, hey, you decided, your team decided that this is something that managers need to look at because likely they weren't going to catch this themselves in the expense management system when they were doing the approvals. So now we're giving them that awareness and visibility in AppZen so that they can hit approve or reject. The auditors will be informed. It will then go back to the normal workflow once all of that is addressed in your case, in Burst, and then they'll see it all on the audit trail. Does that answer your question? You got it. You got it. Yeah, they see over here, sometimes reports will have multiple issues, right? There'll be a high risk for one thing and another. So you can see over here on the right-hand side, this one was for aggregate spend for the month on business meals with attendees, kind of going back to my previous example of the guy at the bar. You have a question over here. What can I do for you? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the auditors don't lose visibility into this, right? So the goal is to make it easier for you, but it's not to take any visibility or control away from you in that workflow process. So you will be able to see, let me see, that's over, yeah, here. As an auditor, you'll see right over here on the top right, or top left, if a manager approved it, if it was high risk before. So even though the manager is saying, hey, this risk is okay, I'm gonna let this one go through, you as an auditor don't lose the power to say, hey, I wanna reject this even though the manager approved it because it's way out of policy. Maybe I need to have a conversation with that manager as well. But you still have that capability and it's still gonna show up in your auditor workflow. All right? Yeah, go for it. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, this is all in AppZen workflow, so it's not going back to Concur. So I'm assuming it's going to be AppZen branding, all right, because that's going to be, and we can look into that and possibly customize. I'm not sure. I don't want to make any promises on that end, but the idea is that the managers are going to be doing those approvals through AppZen for those specific high-risk issues. So going back to the original work list, so you can see down over here now, this is the manager work list. So they get that email notification, they'll log in, they'll see which ones they need to review. And then down over here, they can even see that dashboard for team intelligence that I was talking about. All right, and I'm gonna just hide those dashboards and we'll take a look at some of these that we just, actually, let me go back because I don't think I showed you the other automation framework for high risk spend. So if we look at the high risk right over here, this is aggregate spend. And again, when you're looking at this, you get to decide when you want that approval workflow. So you can actually, to your question, actually, you can actually decide, do you want this approval to go to the manager after an auditor looks at it or before the auditor looks at it? So you do have that decision-making criteria when you're building out the workflow. So do I want it pre-auditor, or do I want it post-auditor, or do I not want the auditor involved when this specific circumstance is flagged, because the manager is always going to be handling that. And this one here is specifically around, aggregation. So if they're going over a certain dollar threshold with a certain vendor or a certain expense type or a certain employee over time, it's going to get flagged. In those circumstances, a lot of times, as we discussed earlier, the managers might say, oh no, that was okay. I understand that the limit is typically $3,000. They went on site with a really big client. We allowed them to spend a lot more money that time, so we're going to approve that even though it's over the aggregate spent. Yep, you got it. Okay, and then just going back to previous screen here. I'm going to jump into that work list, because this is what the managers are going to see. So when they log in, you see the excessive spend right over here. So you can see up on the top right, it gives them what their task is. So this is their task, but as you scroll down on the bottom right, you'll see the expense report. So they'll still be able to see all the lines on the expense report, but they're only looking at that specific task that needs to be handled. They'll be able to come over here and they'll see if anyone else has approved this. If there was anyone else, well, watch out. If there was anyone else in that approval workflow. Go ahead. Yeah. Right? Yeah, as long as that information comes over in the payload from our connector, we should be able to create a workflow based off of it. Maybe, Imran, I know you're working on this with the invoice side. Are we able to do that for specific groups? There you have it. It's a roadmap item. We love that word here. We get a lot of questions. Go for it. What do you mean submits a ticket? Oh, that's custom verbiage that you can type in. Yeah, that's custom verbiage that you can type in. So, to that question earlier about can you have a URL in there, that's something that you can add into the custom verbiage. Right. And it'll just take them outside of AppZen and that. Right. Yeah. Yep. Yep. All these workflows are directly in AppZen, so it doesn't matter what the expense management system is. Mm-hmm. You could actually reverse that ahead of time. Mm-hmm. You could reverse that flow if you wanted to. Yeah, because then the manager would be doing the approvals in AppZen for high risk. Right. Yep, sure can. So as far as the manager's actions, or reject, would that be reflected in the audit trail? Yep. So you can see up over here, there's going to be a home screen specifically for the manager approvals. Now, I think you're asking, is it going to be both approvals and team intelligence on the same page? Right. I think that you just see a snippet of team intelligence in the approvals, right? That I don't know, but that's a good question. Like, does it redirect you over to team intelligence and let you drill down? I'm not sure, but I'll look into that. Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. I mean, that's one of if you have team intelligence enabled, you should see like overall amounts spent on each expense type. Now, how far that goes, I'm not sure. I haven't seen like the full prototype of that screen, but I'm assuming like to that question over there, can it redirect you over to team intelligence so you can make that decision? And I'm pretty certain you'll be able to.
Because that would help the manager have more contact.
Right.
To make that decision. Like,
Exactly.
is my team spending an average of 2,000 a month and 1,000 is $1,000 a quarter?
Right.
Or is my team spending 3,000,
And is
993?
right. Is this individual spending way more than everyone else on my team? When was the last time they closed a deal? Like all those kinds of questions that you want to check on. Yeah, absolutely. Maddie.
Is it going to be possible when we're using the manager as attendee?
Oh yeah. Totally. Yeah, that's part of that traversal hierarchy where you're able to choose what manager you want it to go to. That's a really good call out though, because manager attendee comes out all the time, and if they're the highest ranking officer in the room, they shouldn't be approving it, and they definitely shouldn't be getting an AppZen approval for it, because of course they're going to say approved. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you get to choose. Right. You got it. Right. It's a separate chart. That's not coming over. So you're talking about the traversal approvals? Like, oh, it will be just for that person's team. Yeah. I know I have about 0 minutes left, and Julie's about to kick me off stage. How's everyone feeling about like what you've seen today, both DIY all the way into approval workflows? Are you excited to get this in front of you so you can start, navigating and creating these workflows? Awesome. So this has been helpful for everyone? Awesome. All right, well, thank you so much for the time and engagement. I appreciate you guys joining my session.